It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in the royal family's country home at Anmer Hall. One of those rare, peaceful moments when the noise of the world faded away, and the only sound was the laughter of children echoing through sunlit rooms. Kate Middleton had just returned from an engagement the day before, exhausted but grateful to be back with her children. William was in the study reviewing correspondence, and George and Louis were building forts out of couch cushions. Charlotte, now old enough to understand more than most thought, was sitting beside her mother on the floor, flipping through an old photo album. Not just any album, Diana's album. The pages were worn but well-loved, filled with pictures of a young Princess of Wales smiling beside her sons, holding hands with charities, laughing in gardens, and glowing with that unmistakable grace that made the world fall in love with her. Charlotte stared at one photo longer than the others. One of Diana crouching in a field of poppies, her arms open wide, her smile tender and warm. "She looks like she gives really good hugs," Charlotte whispered. Kate smiled softly, brushing a hand through her daughter's chestnut hair. "She did, darling. The very best." There was a pause. The room was still. Then Charlotte, so small but so full of heart, turned to her mother with eyes wide and sincere. "Can you tell Granny Diana I miss her?" Kate froze. At first she thought she had misheard, but Charlotte's gaze didn't waver. She wasn't trying to be poetic or dramatic. She was just a little girl asking a very real question from a very real place of love and longing. "Even though I never met her," Charlotte added, "I feel like I know her." "Is that silly?" And that was the moment Kate's heart broke. She turned her face slightly, trying not to let Charlotte see the tears welling in her eyes. But it was too late. One had already slipped down her cheek. Charlotte noticed. "Why are you crying, Mummy?" Kate opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her throat was tight, her chest ached. Because how do you explain to a child that the woman she never got to meet is a shadow that lives in every room? That Diana's absence isn't just missing, it's felt? Kate wrapped her arms around Charlotte and held her tight, tighter than she had in a long time. "I'm crying," she whispered into her daughter's hair, "because that's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said." Charlotte leaned into her mother's arms and whispered again, "She'd be a good granny, wouldn't she?" Kate nodded, her voice breaking. "The best, sweetheart. She would have loved you with all her heart." Later that evening, Kate sat alone in her room, the photo album still on her lap, the moment playing over and over in her mind. She had always felt Diana's presence, in the way William held his children, in the compassion he showed strangers, in the way the world still spoke her name with reverence, but now something had shifted. Charlotte felt her too, and that realization undid her. Because this wasn't about headlines or legacy. It wasn't about the crown or the palace. It was about the quiet inheritance of love, passed down from a woman taken too soon to a granddaughter who somehow, impossibly, already missed her. Kate wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered out loud, "She misses you, Diana, and I do too." And somewhere in the silence of that country home, it felt, just for a moment, like Diana had heard her. Charlotte's question, so simple, so devastating, hadn't come from nowhere. It had been building quietly, invisibly, for years. A question shaped by bedtime stories, whispered names in the hallway, and the flickering image of a woman who existed everywhere and nowhere at once. Diana. The name was sacred in the walls of Kensington and Anmer Hall, spoken carefully, always with love. Kate and William had chosen not to hide her from their children, but to honor her, not as a myth, not as a tragedy, but as part of their story, as family. From the earliest days, Charlotte had known about her Granny Diana. There were framed photographs in soft gold on the mantle, books with her name tucked between royal albums, a teddy bear in the nursery named Di, not by accident, but by choice. Still, Charlotte never asked many questions. Not at first. She would point to pictures and say things like, "She's pretty," or "She looks like Mummy," and then return to her coloring or her dolls. But Kate could see the curiosity growing, not just about who Diana was, but why she was missing. Other children had two grannies. George spoke often of Charles and Camilla. There were visits, family photos, Christmas cards, but when it came to Diana, there was only memory. And memory wasn't something a 6-year-old could hold in her hands. One day after school, Charlotte asked innocently, "Is Granny Diana on holiday?" Kate had knelt beside her and said gently, "No, darling, she's in heaven." Charlotte thought for a moment, then nodded with the gravity only small children seem to carry. Like fairy godmothers, she said. Kate had smiled and said yes, exactly like that. But the questions didn't stop there. Over time, Charlotte began pointing her out in documentaries, magazine covers, even on the stamps in the Royal Post Room. Why do people still talk about her so much? Was she a queen? Did Daddy love her? Each question felt like a pin to Kate's chest. Not because they were hard to answer, but because they reminded her that Diana's absence wasn't private. It was public. It was everywhere. Kate and William had always agreed their children would know the truth, but not all at once, and never as a burden. So when Charlotte asked questions, Kate answered them with warmth. She was kind. She helped people who were hurting. She made Daddy laugh even when he was sad. She would have loved you so much. Charlotte would nod, take it in, then ask nothing more until the next time. Then came the moment that would change everything. The afternoon in the garden with the photo album. The one where Charlotte stared at Diana smiling in the field of poppies. She looks like she gives good hugs. And then the sentence that undid Kate completely. Can you tell Granny Diana I miss her? That question hadn't come from nowhere. It had been waiting, building in the heart of a little girl who was slowly realizing that love could live in the spaces between presence and absence. Later, William would say that Charlotte had always been spiritually sensitive, even as a toddler. When they passed statues, she would stop and stare. When they visited Diana's resting place, she always asked for quiet, not out of boredom, but something else, something deeper. Kate often said that Charlotte had Diana's eyes, not in color, but in soul. The way they searched people, the way they softened around pain. And now the very question that shattered Kate wasn't just about Diana. It was about legacy. It was about the idea that even in death, love leaves behind seeds. And somehow, through photographs, through stories, through the ache in her mother's voice, Charlotte had grown roots toward a grandmother she never met and missed her anyway. Long before she married into the royal family, before she wore a tiara or bowed before the Queen, Kate Middleton knew the name Diana. Everyone did. She was a girl in her teens when Diana died. The world mourned in silence and flowers. Millions cried, but none more than her sons. Kate had watched the funeral from the living room of her family home in Bucklebury, eyes wide, heart aching, not quite understanding why this woman she'd never met made her cry. She remembered the image that stayed with her. Two young boys walking behind their mother's coffin. William, Harry, lost, grieving, and silent. Years later, when Kate first began dating William, Diana's shadow became something closer, something personal, not a legend, a wound. Everyone wanted to know how Kate compared to Diana. Was she elegant enough? Was she charitable enough? Did she have that same warmth, that magic? Kate didn't resent the comparisons, but she felt the pressure deeply. When she first moved into the palace, she found herself walking the same halls Diana once had, sitting in the same rooms, greeting crowds who still carried pictures of Diana on faded newspaper clippings. They didn't say it aloud, but she could feel their longing. Be her, be like her. Kate never tried to replace Diana, but she studied her, deeply, respectfully. She read old interviews, studied her speeches, watched old videos where Diana comforted sick children or hugged AIDS patients at a time when the world was too afraid. She took notes, not for press strategy, for empathy. She didn't just visit people, Kate once told William. She saw them. And William had smiled gently, eyes full of memories. That's exactly right. Kate often imagined what it would have been like to meet Diana. She would have asked her about motherhood, about how to survive the press, about how to be warm and strong at the same time. She would have wanted to know how to raise royal children with grounded hearts. She would have asked, too, the painful questions. How do you protect your children from a palace that isn't always kind? There were moments in Kate's early years as a royal when she felt alone, more than she ever admitted publicly. In those moments, she would sometimes walk to the gardens, sit quietly beneath the trees, and whisper words not to the Queen, but to Diana. Please watch over him. He misses you. Help me be the mother you didn't get to finish being. Help me get it right. And then years later, Charlotte came along, and everything shifted again. Charlotte had Diana's spark, cheeky, clever, soulful. Even as a baby, she radiated this quiet strength. And as she grew older, Kate saw more of Diana in her. The empathy, the confidence, the way she always noticed when someone in the room felt left out. Kate once found Charlotte comforting a crying schoolmate in the hallway, her small arms wrapped around the child as she whispered, "It's okay, I'll sit with you." Kate didn't say anything in the moment, but later in her journal she wrote, "Diana lives in her, I feel it." Now sitting beside Charlotte as she held that photo album, asking about a grandmother she'd never touched, Kate felt a kind of spiritual bridge being built between past and present. It was never about filling Diana's shoes. It was about walking beside her in a quiet, invisible way. And when Charlotte said, "Tell Granny Diana I miss her," Kate didn't just hear her daughter. She heard Diana too. "I'm here, I see you, I see her." Children are incredibly perceptive. They notice what's not said, what's not there. And sometimes it's not the absence of noise or toys or attention that unsettles them. It's the absence of someone they were supposed to have. Charlotte had always known she had two grandmothers, but only one ever showed up with birthday gifts. Only one called to say good night before bedtime stories. Only one ever held her hand as they walked through palace gardens. Camilla existed, but Diana was everywhere and nowhere all at once. She was the face in framed photographs, the name whispered during charity events, the quiet story behind the tiara Kate sometimes wore, the ghost who somehow felt real. Charlotte first asked the question when she was just 5. "Why don't I have two grandmothers like my friends?" Kate had paused, not to avoid the question, but to gather her heart. She sat Charlotte down and spoke gently. "You do, sweetheart, but one of them lives in heaven now." Charlotte looked confused. "But I've seen her picture." Kate nodded, swallowing the ache in her throat. "Yes, that's Granny Diana. She was Daddy's mummy. She passed away a long time ago before you were born. But she still loves you, more than anything." Charlotte thought deeply, frowning a little. "So, she can't come to tea?" Kate smiled, the saddest smile. "No, darling, but we can talk to her if you'd like. Sometimes I do." From that moment on, Diana became something more than a photograph. She became part of their daily lives. Charlotte would sometimes write her letters in crayon. She'd ask Kate to leave little drawings by the roses at Kensington Palace, where people still brought flowers each year. She once left a paper crown at the statue of Diana with a note that said, "To my Granny Queen, I love you." The staff cried when they saw it, but the most powerful moments weren't the planned ones. They were the ones that arrived unexpectedly, in whispers, questions, quiet heartbreaks. One evening after a school project about family trees, Charlotte came home with a colored chart, proudly showing her parents where each person belonged. She had written Granny Carol and Grandpa Mike for Kate's parents, then Grandpa Charles and nothing else. "I didn't know what to write for Granny Diana," she admitted. "I didn't want my teacher to think I made her up." That night, Kate cried silently in bed, not out of despair, but out of the deep ache that comes when your child begins to understand the world's unfairness. That love doesn't always come wrapped in arms. That sometimes the people we need most are the ones we never get to meet. Diana was an invisible grandmother, but her love was not. Kate made sure of that. She spoke Diana's name often, never like a myth, but like a mother. She told Charlotte how Diana loved to dance barefoot in the palace, how she would sing to William and Harry until they fell asleep, how she would sneak sweets to them during official dinners and chase them around the gardens to make them laugh. Charlotte clung to those stories like treasure. One day, while sitting beneath a tree, she looked up and said, "Do you think she watches me?" Kate blinked away tears. "Yes, darling, I think she watches all of us." And when Charlotte finally said those 6 words that would tear Kate's heart open, "Tell Granny Diana I miss her," it wasn't a moment of sadness. It was a moment of connection. A granddaughter sending love into the sky, a mother caught between past and present, and a grandmother unseen but still there. As real as memory, as real as love. William didn't cry often. He had learned to control his emotions from a young age, not because he lacked feeling, but because his world demanded it. Royals didn't break down. They didn't grieve publicly. They bowed, smiled, and kept walking, even as their hearts shattered behind their suits and smiles. But Diana had taught him how to feel, And now Charlotte was teaching him how to feel again. When Kate told him what Charlotte had said, "Tell Granny Diana I miss her," William didn't respond at first. He simply sat down, his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. The silence spoke louder than any words. He nodded slowly, but his face was still. "She never even knew her," he said softly. Kate placed her hand on his back. "But she feels her. That's what matters." William swallowed hard, then looked up at a photo of Diana on the nearby table, her eyes bright, full of life. "I used to dream about her," he admitted, "when I was Charlotte's age. I'd dream she was still alive, that she'd just gone away for a while. I'd wake up smiling." Kate's heart tightened. She knew William didn't often speak like this. He carried his mother's memory like a sacred flame, protected, private. "Then I'd realize she wasn't coming back," he continued, "and I'd try to forget I ever dreamed it." For William, grief wasn't a single storm. It was 1,000 tiny ones that returned over the years. In the smile of a stranger, in the echo of his daughter's voice, in the way Charlotte crossed her legs the same way Diana used to during interviews. He never told his children what the press did to his mother. He never mentioned the pain of walking behind her coffin in front of the world. But he carried it all, quietly, protectively, hoping to shield his family from that kind of sorrow. But now Charlotte was asking questions. And somehow, she already knew the ache. She didn't know Diana's scandals. She didn't know about the crown, the controversies, the tabloids. What she knew was the feeling that someone was missing. And from the moment she could talk, Charlotte expressed that absence in the only way she knew how, with sweetness. She'd draw pictures of hearts and clouds, signing them to Granny Diana. She once folded a note into a paper plane and threw it from the balcony, saying, "Maybe the wind will carry it to heaven." She asked to plant forget-me-nots. Diana's favorite flowers are in the palace garden, so she'll know we're thinking about her. William would often watch from the window as Charlotte, in her tiny boots and muddy gloves, gently patted down soil over the seeds. No cameras, no royal staff. Just a little girl trying to say hello to the grandmother she never met. One evening, as William tucked Charlotte into bed, she asked, "Do you think she knows who I am?" William paused, his voice caught in his throat. "I think she knows everything about you," he said, "and I think she's incredibly proud." Charlotte smiled. "I hope I make her happy." "You already do," he whispered, brushing her hair back. After she fell asleep, William sat there for a long time. He watched her breathe, watched her dream, and tried to imagine what Diana would say if she could see her granddaughter now. Would she laugh, cry, sweep her into a tight hug? He hoped it would be all three. Charlotte's sweetness wasn't a performance. It was her truth. It was the gentle, aching love of a child who somehow knew that she came from someone strong, kind, and deeply missed. And in her quiet, innocent way, she was giving William and Kate the greatest gift: a new way to grieve, a new way to remember, and a new reason to keep Diana alive, not just in stories, but in spirit. It was a quiet morning at Kensington Palace when the decision was made, not as part of a scheduled appearance or royal engagement, but as a private family moment. Charlotte had asked if they could go see Granny Diana's special garden. She was talking about the sunken garden, a place of beauty, memory, and reverence, a place where Diana once found peace, a place now adorned with white roses, forget-me-nots, and the statue of the woman who had touched the world and never got to meet her grandchildren. William agreed instantly, and Kate, already holding too many emotions inside her, said nothing. She just nodded. They dressed quietly. There were no stylists, no press, no palace aides, just the five of them. William, Kate, George, Charlotte, and Louis. A family seeking connection with someone who was both legend and a loved one. As they walked toward the garden, Charlotte clutched something close to her chest. A small folded card and a drawing she had spent the night before making in secret. "It's for Granny Diana," she whispered to her mother. "It's just a little picture, and I told her I love her." Kate smiled, holding back the wave that was already rising inside her. "She'll love it," she said softly. When they reached the statue, the children stood quietly. Even Louis, still too young to fully understand, seemed to feel the weight of the space. George took Charlotte's hand. William stood slightly behind them, his eyes distant, full of memories. Charlotte stepped forward and placed the note at the foot of the statue. The paper fluttered slightly in the breeze. Kate leaned forward to read it. In messy but careful handwriting, it said, "Dear Granny Diana, I love you so much. I wish I could have tea with you. I hope you are happy in heaven. Love, your Charlotte Rose." At the bottom was a drawing, a little girl in a dress, holding the hand of a woman in a crown. Both were smiling. That was when Kate lost it. She didn't make a sound. She didn't try to hide behind her usual strength. The tears just came, sudden, heavy, uncontrollable. Her body folded slightly forward, her shoulders trembling. It wasn't just sadness, it was release. It was everything. Years of pressure, years of being strong for William, for the children, for the crown, years of carrying a legacy she never got to meet but had always honored. Now, in this quiet garden, in the presence of a statue and a child's love note, it all came crashing down. William moved quickly, placing a hand on Kate's back. She leaned into him, allowing herself to be held, something she rarely let happen in public or private. The children stood still, unsure, until Charlotte gently tugged on her father's sleeve. "Is Mummy okay?" William nodded, swallowing the lump in his own throat. "Yes, darling. She's just feeling love. Sometimes it comes out as tears." Charlotte nodded as if she understood. Then, without being told, she walked over and hugged her mother tightly. Kate knelt down and pulled her daughter into her arms, burying her face in Charlotte's hair. "She would have loved you so much," Kate whispered. So much." Later, after they had returned home and the children were off playing, Kate sat quietly with her journal. She wrote, "I broke today, but not out of weakness. I broke because my daughter told the truth I've been trying to carry in silence for years. Diana isn't gone. She's here, in Charlotte's drawings, in George's questions, in Louis's laughter. She's watching, she's listening. And today, I think she heard her granddaughter say, 'I miss you.'" That day wasn't just a family outing, it was a moment of generational healing. Because in one innocent gesture, Charlotte had done what years of royal formality never could. She made Diana real again. The palace walls have always echoed with history, some spoken, some whispered, and some too painful to name aloud. But now in the lives of Kate, William, and their children, Diana's memory isn't just an echo. It's a presence, a light they carry forward, a legacy not worn like a crown, but lived gently, daily, lovingly. After that emotional morning in the garden, something changed in the air between Kate and Charlotte. Not in the way they moved or spoke, but in the way they held space for something bigger than themselves. Diana's love had found its way into the next generation, not through titles, but through touch. Charlotte began asking more questions, deeper ones. What was Granny Diana scared of? Did she have dreams like me? Would she like the way I dance? Kate answered each question with care, never turning the princess into a saint, never sugarcoating the sadness. She told the truth. Diana was brave, flawed, kind, and bold. And yes, she absolutely would have loved her dancing. One evening, Charlotte came into the living room in a sparkly dress she had picked out herself. She spun in a circle and said, "I'm dancing for Granny Diana. Can she see me?" Kate didn't hesitate. "She's watching, and I think she's smiling the biggest smile." Charlotte beamed, twirling faster. It wasn't performance, it was pure. It was the joy of a child giving love to someone she'd never touched, but had come to know in the most important way, through the hearts of the people who loved her most. For William, the transformation was quieter. He didn't cry again. He didn't speak much about that morning in the garden. But Kate could feel it. The way he looked at Charlotte differently now, more softly, more protectively. She was, in so many ways, a mirror of the mother he had lost. One afternoon, Kate found him in the study, looking at an old photo of Diana holding baby William on her lap. He wasn't sad, just still. "She'd be so proud of you," Kate said gently. William nodded, but his eyes were focused. "No," he whispered. "She'd be proud of you, for keeping her memory kind. Kate felt tears rise again, the good kind this time, the kind that comes from knowing that even grief, when shared with love, can become something healing. And as for Charlotte, she keeps sending love. Every time they visit Diana's memorial, she brings something, a note, a flower, a ribbon she found in the garden. She talks to her grandmother the way children speak to fairies, as if the air can carry her words upward. And maybe it can. She once whispered to the statue, unaware that her mother was listening, "I'll make you proud too, Granny, I promise." Kate had to step away, her heart swelling too fast to contain. In time, as Charlotte grows, more questions will come, and so will moments of quiet recognition in herself, in the world, in the weight of her family's name. But she will not walk that road alone. She will walk it with a mother who remembers, with a father who still carries a boy's grief behind a king's posture, and with a grandmother who lives not in shadows, but in drawings, in dance, in dreams. On the night Charlotte turned 8, Kate sat beside her bed and tucked her in, as she always did. "Good night, my love," Kate said. Charlotte smiled sleepily. "Tell Granny Diana I miss her," she mumbled again, like a bedtime prayer. Kate leaned in close, kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "She knows she misses you too." Then softly, as if saying it to herself, "And she's with us, always." Because some bonds don't break, some love doesn't end, and some goodbyes never really happened at all.